For dancers who experience a history of disordered eating, orthorexia is one of the most common challenges faced, even for those with the best intent to support their performance and their dancing. The culprit is often those clean eating lifestyles that open the gates to restrictive and very regimented eating patterns, in the long run, limiting a dancer's health and performance. What is the orthorexic identity, and how can dancers learn to move past it in building a more productive and supportive relationship with food? That's what I'm chatting about today.
I'm Rachel Fine, registered dietitian nutritionist and founder of To The Point Nutrition. A dancer's performance is a direct result of hard work and motivation. So where does food fit into this? There's a lot of myths and a ton of antiquated ideals, and I'm here to dispel those.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fine. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist working with dancers just like you to help them build supportive fueling habits in addition to their relationships with food. Today we're talking about an incredibly important topic, especially for my dancers who don't always know that they're struggling with something called disordered eating. And it's the topic of orthorexia, or an obsession with wanting to eat healthy. So much that those who struggle with orthorexia often avoid certain foods and entire food groups just for that pursuit of health. And while for many dancers, on the outside it can seem like making mealtime choices to support health is the best thing you can do for performance, but when those choices become obsessive and overly rigid, so much that they prevent you from experiencing other aspects of life, whether that means social and cultural experiences with food, or if there is that overwhelming amount of stress and food guilt associated with eating or eating foods not deemed to be clean or healthy enough, that's when these patterns become problematic. And for dancers who have started the work of what I call redefining the healthy dancer, holding on to an identity, specifically to the orthorexic identity. So this is for dancers who have struggled with disordered eating, who are now doing the work of rebuilding their relationship with food, but still having to navigate instances, whether it's yourself, a friend, or a family, referring to you as, and I quote, the healthy one, or those who view you as maybe being the, and I quote, good dancer because, and I quote, eating right and keeping up with that demanding cross-training routine. For those of you in those early stages of healing your relationship with food and moving past this identity, those subtle reminders can often make this work even more challenging. So to start moving through this, I want you to first recognize that disordered eating doesn't define you. Now here's the deal. Disordered eating and obsessive exercise can strongly influence your day-to-day. These behaviors, they can also strongly impact, often negatively impact, your relationships with others. And your disordered eating, or for those of you who have been diagnosed with an eating disorder, these challenges can very much drive decisions like whether you go out to lunch with friends, or whether you have it in you to challenge a fear food today, or if instead you're going to stick with a, and I quote, safer option. But here's an incredibly important fact. Neither your relationship with food nor your ability or challenges with balancing your exercise patterns reflects who you are as a person. And no matter how long you've struggled with any of these challenges, neither defines the value that you bring to this world. And while a history or past disordered eating is part of your story, it's never going to be your whole story. So it is possible to rebuild your identity, reshape your thoughts, and shift your behaviors to those that will support your healing and recovery. What are some strategies to dismantle the orthorexic identity? Well, first I want you to separate yourself from your symptoms. Now, this is going to sound a little bit strange, but for some, it actually might help to begin pointing out some of the pros of disordered eating. I know this sounds weird. Stay with me. You might enjoy that feeling of control when eating restrictively. You might also be wanting or holding on to very falsified promises of dancer diet culture, specifically around the supposed, and I quote, success that is often sold to us alongside those restricted and regimented behaviors. Success might be especially surrounding body changes, body composition changes, and weight changes. Those promises, and I quote, you will look like this if you eat like this. That hope in finally achieving a body size that you or dancer diet culture has deemed to be, and I quote, acceptable, but by very harmful industry standards. Now, once you've identified some of those pros, I now want you to identify how each and every one of those pros and behaviors might not be serving you. A couple examples: leading to major social isolation, putting you at risk for injury, specifically around restrictive eating patterns, not eating certain food groups, those that might contain essential nutrients for bone building, and also the potential for burnout. This one is big because many of the dancers who experience restrictive disordered eating ultimately experience burnout because of the inability to sustain those very impractical food or eating or even body values. Once we've identified all of these, we now do the work of dismantling them. We know that the sense of comfort felt when attempting to micromanage or control your food choices or your body size, it's fleeting. We also know, as I just mentioned, that striving for those impractical and harmful ideals can easily risk both injury and burnout. Ultimately, they are derailing you from your performance goals. Through this work, I always want you to have compassion. It is completely human to want to strive for the comfort in situations that often feel uncomfortable. Situations in this instance might be the fear of the unknown, a fear of knowing how your body will look when unraveling restrictive food rules, a fear of knowing whether you're going to get that role that you've always wanted for that performance. So there's a lot of discomfort that dancers face on a day-to-day. Striving to micromanage and control their food choices or their body size often provides that comfort, but that comfort, as I mentioned earlier, it's temporary, it's fleeting, and it's often leading us to an increased risk of injury and burnout. Perhaps the next step for you is to explore additional patterns and behaviors that will bring you more joy and less stress in your day. For many dancers, this means picking up some additional hobbies or joyful movement patterns outside the studio, like Pilates, yoga, foam rolling. As you continue to build more of these additional hobbies, knitting, artwork, painting, reading, listening to music, you will start to rebuild from those orthorexic tendencies without simultaneously feeling consumed by them. Now, increasing caloric intake, breaking your food rules, these are two major parts of the puzzle. And in that instance, working with a registered dietitian nutritionist to help you do both is incredibly important. As you do this work of dismantling a lot of those beliefs that have unfortunately built that framework of the orthorexic identity, I also want you to reflect on your life before disordered eating. Can you remember a time before? This might be an opportunity for you to journal. And of course, the difficulty level of this question will depend on how long you've partaken in disordered eating patterns. If diet culture infiltrated your life at a very young age, which is quite common for dancers, then it might be hard to remember life without restrictive eating. The same holds true for any dancer who has experienced food insecurity, a lack of access to sufficient amounts of food throughout their day. So the longer it's been, the more comfortable, the more secure you might feel holding on to those restrictive eating patterns, using those as coping tools to move through the undeniable pressures of the dance world. So we want to, again, be very compassionate and not judgmental of ourselves for holding on to some of these patterns. Reflect while you are doing that work to unlearn, relearn the harmful effects of restrictive eating and overexercising, and dismantle them at their core. Can you craft a few new mental images of life without extremely regimented or restrictive eating patterns? It might mean envisioning a day where you're going out with friends to enjoy some ice cream. It might mean a day where you are taking off from both dance and cross-training routines just to relax and veg out. Or perhaps it's a day without any mealtime stress. What can you envision? Utilize that within your journaling prompts. And another important aspect as you are rebuilding an identity without orthorexia or disordered eating being the forefront of it is to understand how you can respond to others. Because as you are working to heal your relationship with food, it can be challenging if those around you continue to remind you of your past restrictive experience with it. Even if their intent is not necessarily harmful, it can still feel very triggering. Now, it's always possible to let close, trusted friends and family know about the journey you're moving through. But also remember that you're never required to engage in these conversations if you don't feel ready for it. Building a toolbox of responses can be quite helpful. For example, you're eating with friends who presume that you might not want to try a certain food because of your history of either wanting to eat cleanly or super healthfully. Now, a simple response like, "Oh, I'd love to try that too," might be all you need. But if you're probed further, simply explain, "I'm working on my relationship with food these days." You can also try to change the subject, like, "I'm working on rebuilding my relationship with food. By the way, did you watch that new series?" I have a bunch more helpful strategies that you can use as you unravel from the orthorexic identity. And I'd love for you to access them on my blog. As per usual, I'm going to share a link in the show notes. If any additional questions come up, you know where to find me. Just simply email me. You can contact me over Instagram. I am here to support you. So until next time, I'll talk to you soon.